Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies, where we explore all things cinema. I want to welcome back to the show Eddie Muller, aka the Czar of Noir. He is the host of Turner Classic Movies Noir Alley. He is also the prolific author of novels, biographies, plays, films, and movie histories, including Dark City, Revised and Expanded Edition, the essential cocktail manual, Eddie Muller's Noir Bar, and the children's book, Kid Noir. He also programs and hosts the Noir City Film Festival series, curates museums, and provides commentary for television, radio, DVDs, and Blu-rays. As founder of the Film Noir Foundation, Muller has been instrumental in restoring and preserving dozens of lost noir classics, and we're discussing his book, Dark City Dames, Revised and Expanded Edition, The Women Who Defined Film Noir, which just came out this month. Eddie, welcome back. Great to have you.
Robert, it is very nice to be here again. Always a pleasure to talk with you.
It's always an honor to have you as well. And I can't tell you how much I love this book. I mean, it's such an emotional roller coaster from the ups and downs of these women's lives. I mean, I found it quite moving, and it feels so lived in. It doesn't just feel like a profile. It feels like real stories that I got lost in. And as an actor myself, I really appreciated a book about what it's like not to be a celebrity, which is what the public really knows. But they were more successful than your average actor, obviously, these six women. But it really shows the grind and the hustle and how challenging it is. So, I mean, my hat's off to you. It's a wonderful, wonderful book.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your saying that. It is the book of which I am most proud, which I think comes through. It certainly comes through in the afterword that I got to include in this edition of the book, and just how much it meant to me to be able to earn the trust of these women so that they would let me write their stories so vividly and so honestly. At least I assume that was the case. But I just that makes me feel very good. Thank you. And I can tell you read the book, which sometimes I do interviews and it's like, I'm not entirely sure this person has read the book.
Oh, God. Yeah, other people tell me that too, and I can't imagine bringing someone on without having read the book. I guess with TV, they don't have much time. But
well, you remember Larry King. I mean, he was famous for never actually reading anything of any author that he had on. He would just like wing it. I'm a pro. I'll just wing it.
Yeah, I don't know how
to the author, it really matters if you read the book and it has the intended impact. So that's great. Thank you.
My pleasure. And just so for people who haven't are just becoming familiar with the book, the six women are Jane Greer, Audrey Totter, Marie Windsor, Evelyn Keyes, Colleen Gray, and Anne Savage. I wanted to start by asking, because I found you had these great experiences in the late 90s when you started the Noir City Film Festivals and having these women come and watching them watch these movies, 40, 50 years later. I understand that was the inspiration and where the idea came for the book.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. It grew out of, that first year that I was asked to program a festival at the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood. It wasn't yet the Noir City Festival. That would be 5 or 6 years down the road when it became successful enough that I kind of took over, became the impresario of all these festivals. But the Cinematheque definitely in Hollywood gave me my start as a film programmer, just for this one festival. But yes, there was a very interesting guy named Marvin Page who was kind of gatekeeper to the stars. He was a casting director, and he loved old Hollywood and kept tabs on all of the older stars just in case something came up, that he could get for them on a soap opera or something. And although it was interesting, about the time this book was done, just before the book was written, the big movie, of course, was Titanic. And all of these women kind of auditioned for the part that Gloria Stewart got in Titanic. It was kind of interesting. Yeah. I think Audrey Totter probably came the closest to actually getting a callback for that. But so they were still working on occasion, you know. But anyway, Marvin set up these appearances by the women, and as you say, that was sort of what got the ball rolling. And then because I knew they were going to appear, I talked to the editor of Los Angeles Magazine about doing a story on them, and so it was first a magazine article where they all posed for, in the magazine article, my profiles of them were very, very terse. It was like 3 paragraphs about each actress. But the big feature was that they paid Matthew Ralston, a very noted photographer, they paid him a ton of money to photograph the 7 of them, because he also photographed Claire Trevor, which she didn't end up coming out to the festival, but she was photographed for that. And that was the start of it. And then just little by little, I think it was really Anne Savage who, once she started telling me her story, convinced me, you know, there's really a book in here. And then it went from there. So, but always the point of the book was to profile them totally.
Yeah.
Not just as the women they were in their heyday in Hollywood, but to follow them through their lives once Hollywood had affixed its expiration date on their career, because of the, you know, because in old Hollywood the studios had their stable, and you fit a role. You know, right? We want an Audrey Totter type. We want an Evelyn Keyes type, or something like that. And so when they no longer fit their own mold, you know, it wasn't like they got to graduate up to character parts like you see so many actresses today who are able to continue having a long career. You know, the Meryl Streeps and Helen Mirrens and Annette Benings, they're not confined by their age, or thankfully no longer, you know, our standards of acceptable appearance of a woman on screen. Like, I don't want to look at her, she's old, you know. And you may have seen that little bit I put in the afterword, how it enraged me when the original book, I thought this would make a great segment on a very popular daytime talk show, the most popular daytime talk show I think of all time. I don't know why I'm so vague about it. I don't want them to come after me or something. But you know, and I said, the women can come on and it would be really a great show. And they said, the producer said, nobody likes to look at old ladies. Nobody likes to look at old women. So we'll pass on that. You know, they couldn't imagine a show of 6 women in their 70s, you know, some were 80 by that point, who had all these fabulous life experiences and so much to talk about and offer. And it was like, no, we don't want to look at old women. Disgusted me, and that's part of the reason I'm so happy that the book has been revived, so I can tell that story. Right. But you know, it's a thing that the culture needs to deal with and mature a little bit, so that they understand that, you know, people have these long lives, and being a movie star wasn't everything to these women. Right. It was pretty cool though.
Yeah. Oh, certainly. And you say in the book that you wanted to revise it for years. Was that why? Because of the way some of those reactions were at the time, you thought now it would be better received, perhaps? Or
I wanted it to be revived just because I didn't feel like it got the best shake it could have gotten when it first came out. You know, and obviously that's true of everything that I do now. I didn't have a TV show back then, you know, and so I've had a pretty interesting career arc where I went from just doing my own books, and, you know, literally desktop publishing is how I began, you know, and I sold my books originally largely on the notion that I could design them as well as I could write them. So in the early days of desktop publishing, this is the late 90s, 1990s. And this, I'm talking about desktop publishing at a, high level where you're providing the finished files to a New York publishing house, which was not something that was all that common at the time. I think I was a test case. Like, let's see if this guy can actually do this, And truth be told, Robert, I got paid more to design the book than I got paid to write it. This was true of the first 3 or 4 books that I did, that I actually did the design work. And I just felt like I believe that Dark City Dames, as much as I love and appreciate Judith Regan, who was the original publisher of the book, and she was 100% behind my approach to it, that I wanted the book to be as much about them as older women as it was about their heyday in Hollywood. And Judith was totally into that, so I appreciate that. But she was a somewhat controversial figure in publishing and media in general. And I think that by the time the book was ready to come out, she was involved in so much entangled stuff, including, as you may, I don't remember, if you might be too young to remember this. She was going to do the interview with O.J. Simpson and get him to confess on camera.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it kind of backfired on her. And so all of this is a long way of saying that the book kind of got lost in the shuffle on its original release.
I see.
And so I just wanted more people to have the opportunity to read it. And then lo and behold, at a certain point I was eager, like, it's been 10 years. Why can't I get this book back in print? And then TCM showed up. And then it was like, okay, hold your horses. I can develop something here. And of course, the show has been a tremendous success. And so I've got a much bigger audience now than I ever had. And so now I'm really glad. I'm glad that we waited 20 something years to get these books back in print. Same thing is true of Dark City, The Lost World of Film Noir, which is the book that really started everything. And same thing. I was very eager to get that back in print, but I'm now very, in hindsight, I'm very glad that it didn't happen too fast, because, the after getting Noir Alley and getting this, national exposure and getting a much higher profile, it's been great for book sales. Let's just be obvious,
Yeah.
And yes, and I was stunned when, like, the Hollywood Reporter put out this thing a year or so ago about what are the 100 greatest film books of all time. And Scott Feinberg, the editor, was kind enough to include me on the ballot, right? And let me vote as well. And now I say, damn, I'm sorry I didn't vote for myself on the ballot, because Dark City would have finished higher on the list of the 100 best film books if I had voted for myself. But that was just really that was a surprise. But see, that's because they were voting on the revised and expanded edition of Dark City, not the original edition, which wasn't well known enough to make that cut of the 100. But then 20 years later, people are now familiar with it. And, that was people in the industry voting on it. So it's like, wow. So people in the business they're familiar with the book.
Right. And now with the new edition, the word "wicked" got dropped, I noticed.
Yes.
That was the publisher's idea, I understand, or not idea, but requirement.
I don't even think it was a requirement. It was definitely the publisher's idea.
Okay.
And it's a bit of a trade-off. I mean, it didn't really matter to me because I'm not, what's on the cover doesn't matter to me, is what's between the covers, right? That's the testimony. The cover's just the wrapping paper that's selling it, right? The book is the book. And they were completely 100% everything I wanted in the book, I got in the book. So I'm very happy about that. But I understood the change because I just think in today's, society is so volatile now. Our culture is at war with itself. And I think publishers are just very careful about putting something out there that can be misinterpreted
I
and
see.
cause a furor, a tempest in a teapot, which is what America specializes in. And, just they said, why give them the chance? We're just gonna change this to something more less divisive or more empowering. Like The Women Who Defined Film Noir is a much more empowering title than
Right.
The Wicked Women of Film Noir. And I mean, if you wanted to make a case, Colleen Gray never played a wicked woman in her life, so she doesn't really qualify as one of the wicked women of film noir. But that change meant nothing to me. I understood exactly why they were asking for it, and yeah, I don't want anything to upset the apple cart in getting books to market and sold. So I had no problem with that change. And now, 20 some odd years later, I think the culture is probably more, they're more ready for some of the stories these women have to tell, and understanding that, Me Too and all of that stuff is nothing new, but it's something that a previous generation, I think it's important, especially for women who read this book, to understand that it wasn't like the previous generation went along with it completely, but they had no choice and they dealt with the same issues in a different way. And I just think it's really important to see that. I mean, there was Jane Greer could have had a case definitely for, Howard Hughes tried to destroy my life and career, but there was no recourse for her then. She just had to take it and like it.
Right.
And I think it's very important to see that some things have changed dramatically and other things have not changed at all.
I couldn't help but wonder when I was reading the book, particularly when that came up with Jane Greer and how Howard Hughes, harassed her and basically ruined her career because she refused to have an affair with him. And I couldn't help but wonder, when Me Too broke, Eddie must have been thinking about these stories. I mean, was that very, it's in a way the book's ahead of its time because you were breaking these kind of stories. Not that the book is all about that, of course, but it's certainly a part of it. I wondered if when Me Too happened, if that was another reason why you thought I should get this book out.
I'll be honest with you, Robert. I wasn't entirely sure what my feeling was about that. Me Too happened. It was still happening, obviously.
Yeah.
And I mean, I went back and forth all over the place because it's very difficult to get a handle on this. What my way of dealing with it is just to find the human story in it, right? Because I get really tired in the culture these days of everything having a label on it. And are you on this team? Are you on that team? What team are you on? And all. And it's like, I just want the human story. I want to know what this person's life was about. What can we learn from it? What do they have to share? And I thought, in the end, the thing that really I felt extremely fortunate and grateful for these women not only being so open and honest, but for them being so different, because it was almost like, and this was not totally intentional. It was just the luck of the draw that they were all different. Colleen was very religious and very devout, very conservative. Evelyn was as liberal as a human being can possibly be. And, Anne was a gun-toting, I wouldn't say she was like an NRA type or anything like that, but she knew how to fly a plane. She knew how to field strip a rifle. I mean, she was a man's woman, and Audrey Totter was not, she was a very practical, simple woman, also very conservative. Jane was very liberal. So it was a really interesting mix of personalities and character and beliefs, and I just thought that it was really great that it worked out that way, because essentially, in the eyes of Hollywood, in the eyes of the business, they were all interchangeable. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, we need that bad woman. We need the bad woman in this. Who are we going to get? Oh, let's get Marie Windsor. Oh, she's not available. What about Audrey Totter? Oh, you can't call Jane Greer. It's like that, and it's so interesting to me that they were all essentially vying for the same parts.
Right.
And they all were typecast in that way, but they were all very, very different people. And I'm glad that I was able to bring that out. It's very interesting, Robert. The only thing that escaped me when I talk about like casting this book, and I'm trying not to read too much into this, but there were two women that I wanted to get who I couldn't get, and they were the ones that ended up with all the money. And I don't know what to read into that, but Claire Trevor and Rhonda Fleming were extremely wealthy women who Claire Trevor's husband, Milton Bren, essentially built Orange County. So, I mean, there was a lot of dough there. And Rhonda ended up marrying Ted Mann, who was a, theater magnate, as they call him, and was one of the most prolific philanthropists in Southern California. Rhonda, she was just fabulous. But they didn't really have as much interest in sharing their stories, and to me that says a lot. That the more affluent you get, the more guarded you get, and the more secretive you get. And it's interesting to me that there's Ann Savage, who's just living in a 1-bedroom apartment off the Sunset Strip, and she was like opened up about her entire life, had absolutely nothing to protect. So I wish I had gotten one of the huge success stories in the book, but it's only to serve as a contrast,
I wonder if it was, maybe in their case, because they had so much, they weren't willing to risk anything they had if they opened.
Well, in Rhonda's case, that was absolutely what it was. I mean, she said that to me. Like, I'm just not in a position now where I can be that open and honest, because people will take it the wrong way. People will, I can't take any risks at this stage of my life. And of course, in this new version of the book, I do profile 10 additional women, including Rhonda and Claire. And that was nice that the publisher, and that was kind of interesting because, they, Running Press, who does a great, great job with my books now, they wanted to pay me for this book, but they wanted something extra, like to make it different from the original version of the book. So my editor, Cindy Sapala, said, can you just do new profiles? And of course, at first I was resistant to that because I couldn't interview all the women I wanted to write about were gone. Right. So I couldn't do anything close to what I had in the original book. But I thought it might be interesting to tell some tales that, because if all the 6 women had one thing in common, is that they all lived into their late 70s. Right. So they had the full life. They'd survived, in other words. And being able to then write about some women who didn't survive offered a really nice counterpoint to even if you're saying, woe is me and I had a rough life. None of these women said that, mind you. I'm just talking about the reaction people might have reading their stories, which get pretty rough. Jane's story is really kind of tragic, and Anne's story has its real rough patches in it. But when you're feeling sorry for them, now I get to include some stories as you think that's bad. How about if it was Gail Russell's life, or or Helen Walker's life, or Peggy Castle's life? Not they didn't make it. They didn't get the full ride.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I certainly felt bad for them at times, but at the same, what I liked was that there's something so normal about their lives, like that everyone can relate to. Everyone has ups and downs. I don't. I didn't necessarily feel like, oh, I'm too bad they didn't become a big star. I mean, they had again, as an actor myself, these are rare careers. People are lucky. I think Anne Savage said that in the book. You're lucky if you get anything. Get a line
Mhm.
every now and then. So they still had significant parts. One thing I found interesting is that it seemed as though I can't speak for all of them, but that some of them liked being under the studio system to an extent because they were under contract, they were given assignments. I mean, Evelyn Keyes said, she missed Harry Cohn. I mean, God, what if they were a guy who is so horrible to so many of these women and men, and in a way, being independent has its pros and cons. But actors are not business people, and so you have to learn. It can be tricky to then have to learn all of that while you're also being creative and stuff. So on the one hand, sometimes myself, I wish I was just under contract somewhere, and then just if I'm not working, they're still paying you or whatever. Was that your impression? Did they seem to have, even looking back, thank God we had a studio system then, or was their reactions sort of more mixed about that?
It was, I mean, that's a really good observation, but it was very mixed. Um, Marie, of course, she said, I hate it when they say the studio life, it was like a family. She says it wasn't a family for me.
Right.
They didn't come over here and take care of my groceries and do my laundry. And, she said I had to do everything for myself. I had to fend for myself. And, if you're not one of the golden children at the studio can be really heartless to these people. Marie knew exactly what she was getting into because when she signed the contract with MGM, they basically said, you're here to keep Joan Crawford in line. Because she was like the next Joan Crawford.
I never realized the resemblance, but they do look alike. I was like, oh yeah,
Yeah. And then, well, this was not uncommon at all. I mean, Ned Young, when he signed a contract with Warner Brothers, they said, we're just going to keep you around so that Bogart can see you and realize that we've got a guy who looks just like him waiting in the wings.
Oh my God.
Yeah, well, Warner's did it to Tab Hunter in the 50s too, when they signed Troy Donahue, just so that Tab wouldn't get too big for his britches.
Wow.
So they all understood that. They all felt it. And then when MGM dropped Joan Crawford, how do you think that made Marie feel? Like it's not like now I get to take her place. It's like now they have no use for me either. And so she basically became like a freelancer. Same thing happened to Anne Savage when she was at Columbia. As soon as they signed other tall, shapely blondes, like Janice Carter or somebody, she said, uh-oh, now I've got competition. This is I also lucked out because somehow magically I got all these actresses who were at different studios. I mean, that was kind of interesting. That Colleen was at Fox, and Audrey was at MGM, and Jane was at RKO. Evelyn was at Columbia, and it was just very interesting that it allowed me to run around town and check in at all these different places when telling their stories. It was, although there were great similarities between the studios, of course, because they were just run by these despots, but which wasn't always a bad thing. So anyway, the thing, Robert, that you touched on that matters so much is it was very important for me to talk to women of that generation, but be able to ask them questions that they were never asked at that time, because no one would think to ask those questions of a woman at that time. And so to have them, and so when Evelyn talks about, yes, I loved working for the studio. It was, I didn't have a worry in the world. I knew they'd take care of me, blah, blah, blah. And then at the same time, Harry Cohn is making her life totally miserable. He's like keeping her on a string, pretending that he's going to leave his wife, and it's really you, baby, that I'm in love with, and blah, blah, blah. And she has to navigate all this nonsense, and she does it. And she does it with great aplomb, and always thinking taking responsibility for it being her own life. That was the thing that was so interesting to me. Is like at a certain point she said, "You know what? I'm tired of this, and they're getting tired of me, and so I got to go out and live my own life." And she just left Hollywood and disappeared. But then, came back, but she came back on her own terms. And I found that very interesting. I think there's a lot for people to take away from the book, given a lot of these same situations occurred today, and people just immediately jump to one side of the fence or the other. And that wasn't a possibility for these women. So they had to learn how to negotiate their way through all of this. And there's something very positive in that, I think, and these were very, very strong women, but the culture wasn't really giving them the opportunity to show that.
Right.
Because that's not needed from you, and I think we're, in some ways really regressing and that, there are certain forces in the culture today that want to shove women back in that box, and it's like that train has left the station. And I think we're going to find out about that. So
the way I also like the way in which the book is structured to an extent feels like a film noir, because you don't just start at the beginning of the story. You sort of start maybe on a certain film that they're working on, and then there's a flashback. And I thought, oh, this is like a noir. Was that intentional, or did that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Robert, you did read the book and you noticed that. That's one great thing about writing about noir and in the style of noir, is that narratively you are not stuck to a linear.
I love that.
Structure. Yeah. You can move around. And so it was absolutely, I do not like profile pieces that begin with so-and-so was born and blah, blah, blah. And this, it's like, oh my God, much better to meet the women right in the midst of, making a film. Like, Evelyn, when we meet her, is like giving birth on the set of The Prowler. She's not really, but she's faking it,
Right.
And it allows, and then, it's almost like you can feel the screen going, woo. Then we go back to how did she get here,
Yeah.
And then there's that huge jump when the first chapter of each woman ends. And then when the story picks up, it's many, many years later.
I love that.
Decades later. And then they're thinking back on how they got there now. So again, I give all credit to my original editor, Cal Morgan, and publisher Judith Regan. Saw something in that approach and allowed me to write this book, which I honestly feel a lot of other publishers, if I had pitched this to them, they would have said, how about just a coffee table book with nice photos of these women and write a little text to go along with it. And that was not my game at all.
No. Yeah, no, I love, again, I applaud the structure, because I really, really enjoyed that. I couldn't help, it's interesting because as you said, politics came up, religion came up, and they all had different views. Were you comfortable to, if you, let's say you found yourself disagreeing or even agreeing, were you comfortable to share that with them, or were you just very neutral when certain, so I love Colleen Gray, but some of the things she said, I sort of raised my eyebrows. Some of her views, I thought, oh God. I was curious how you sort of, handled yourself in those situations.
It was easy because they were open. They invited me into their homes. There's a certain decorum that is expected when somebody invites you into their home and is so giving of their time. So it also, I saw them as human beings and not as this side or that side or whatever. And it's like, they have a story to tell, right? And my job was to tell that story as effectively as possible. I'm not judging the story. I'm telling the story, right? And Colleen is a different person than I am, but I found her quite fascinating. And as much as I don't believe, it's not that I don't believe in Colleen. I don't believe in some of the organizations that Colleen put her faith in.
Right.
I don't necessarily trust those organizations, but I trust Colleen.
I see.
I trust Colleen because I knew her and I knew that she had everyone's best interest at heart and that she genuinely believed in what she was supporting, her Christian fellowship. And I'm not going to talk smack about anybody that actually goes into prisons to talk to prisoners about rehabilitating themselves. I don't care what they're selling. They're there. They're there. They're talking the talk and walking the walk.
True.
And it's like, I got no problem with that whatsoever.
Right.
I remember Colleen we had a big, not an argument. We never argued, but I know, or at that point I was doing a thing at the Egyptian with Mamie Van Doren. And Colleen was just like, thought of Mamie Van Doren as like doing the devil's work or something. And she was like, Eddie, what? You're going to do something with that woman? And it was just like, come on, Colleen, Mamie Van Doren's the greatest, Anyway, so that's, I appreciate your asking that question. And it was not hard because, I'm a journalist. That's what I did for a living. So it's like, I'm not in the book, right? I mean, and as much as it is I was going to say my voice, it's as much as it is my style of storytelling that is everywhere in that book. I'm not in the book, right? I mean, I'm not a character in the book, and I have no interest in. I also hate it when writers do that. We sat down over steamy cups of coffee to discuss, the vagaries of her career and blah, blah, blah. It's like, I'm not in the book, right? So you may wonder how I can describe Evelyn's apartment in such detail.
Right.
I was there, right? I mean, I spent a lot of time in that apartment, but I'm not going to say I'm in the apartment. I'm just going to tell you what the apartment looks like.
Right. I also just touching on some of the profiles of the additional 10 women, because I've always loved Jan Serling. I was so glad you included her, and I didn't realize that she came from quite a wealthy upbringing, because, and as you said, she never everything. She's so convincing as the complete opposite of someone who lived a hard scrabble existence. But you mentioned a film which is in my top 100 that she's in, is The Incident, which is oh my God, and she's amazing in that. She's got a scene on the train where she stands with the two guys, and then she's fighting with her husband, and I was glad that, because did you only recently see that? For some reason I saw on Facebook someone asked you about The Incident, and you had said, oh, I haven't seen it. So did you then go and watch a lot more of the films? I imagine from these 10 women in the research.
Yes.
Yeah, I figured.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Jan had such a thank you for mentioning Jan. That was a really fun profile to write, and I'm glad again that my editor. I like to have fun and mix things up, and so the Jan Sterling profile begins in a very unusual way.
I won't spoil it, but it was. I like how you led the audience one way, and then surprise,
because because that seemed the best way to tell the tale of this person is there. Everybody's going to believe this when they start reading it, because I don't want to be too vague, but I basically describe the character that she plays in all of her movies and give a biography of that character.
Yeah,
but everybody's going to assume that's Jan Sterling, and then it's like, no, that's that's every character she ever played in a movie. But here's the real Jan Sterling, and it's entirely 180 degrees opposite of what you think.
Yes, absolutely.
And I remember, Yeah, that was I had forgotten that Jan Sterling was also another actress that I actually didn't know, because she
Right.
came out to the Egyptian theater several times to present movies, and it's also very sad how many of these women eventually got Alzheimer's.
Mm,
Is distressing, very distressing,
yeah.
because that eventually happened to Evelyn. It happened to Rhonda Fleming. It happened to Jan Sterling, and probably a few more that I'm neglecting right now. But that was tough.
Mm,
But seeing it was interesting because it was something I'd end up dealing with my own mother, and so it was helpful to go through that with these actresses, so it prepared me for what I was going to have to deal with my mom. That's also an interesting thing I think in the book, is that nobody, when they think of um, actors and performers, they don't think of them being the children of someone unless they're famous. But so many of these people also had to take care of their parents. Like
mm,
Anne Savage was, like, in addition to all the problems that were going on in her life, she had to take care of her mother.
right.
That was a really important thing. And in some cases, like, there was clearly no family connections, like Evelyn, none, zero. She
Mm.
was a family free person. And then in other cases that, it was very different. There was a family life there.
Mm.
Interesting.
What was did you feel equally close to them, or did you feel closer to some more than others?
Mm, uh, it all depended on the situation. I mean, clearly the women who were alone, it was much easier to spend more time with them, right? So Anne Savage, I spent a lot of time with Anne. I spent a lot of time with Evelyn. Jane Greer was still with Frank London at this point, and he had cancer, and so she was very attentive to all his needs. That's why she turned down every offer I made for public appearances and stuff, because she didn't want to. Frank couldn't go out in public.
Ah, right.
He was too susceptible to viruses and stuff. Um, and so, yeah, I didn't. I saw Audrey a fair amount, and Colleen. Colleen was by far the most active of all of them. She was into everything, and she was always trying to get me to go to her events. Come to choir practice, and she was the organizer, boy. The Energizer Bunny.
Well, what one great thing, one of that comes from a really good film book, is that you discover so many films to either see again or see. So, I mean, I already logged so many of these on my letterbox watch list, and of course some I saw, like The Sleeping City. Speaking of Colleen, I mean, what an unusual film. The whole thing is at Bellevue. It's
Yeah,
a hospital noir. I thought, my God, I had never heard of it.
yeah, it is. That's exactly at hospital, and it's so quiet, and it's like
Very quiet, hardly any music in it, even.
it's like a tomb. The hospital is like the catacombs or
Yeah.
something. But yeah, very interesting movie, and I'm glad that's back in circulation. I've been showing that one this year on the festival circuit, because we're doing the Noir City festivals this year. Obviously, are all based around these actresses, and I'm trying to show as many films as
Oh, of
possible.
course, yeah.
And the Sleeping City is one that I never really showed that much in the past, and so it's nice to break that one out. And I don't want to give away any spoilers about why it's a different kind of Colleen role, but
Yes.
yeah. The other thing that was interesting, Robert, is um, this is deep in the weeds now, but between the making the first book and this book, so much time had passed. I forgot that the women gave me a lot of photographs to use in the first book that I gave back, and then 20 some odd years had passed, and trying to find the files
Floppy.
with the scanned images that I had done for the book was not easy.
Mm.
and the original photographs just disappeared back into, their kids have them, or they, who knows, maybe they got sold on eBay or so, I don't know. But I was able to get a lot of the photographs, somehow found them. But there was one set of a contact sheet that Colleen had given me of pictures where she got to be the femme fatale that she always wanted to be.
Yeah, because that's only in the original book, right? It's not
only in the original book. Yeah, where the photographer came and she's like in her negligee
they're
on
great
the bed.
pictures.
She's being very, very sexy, and it's like, wow, this is a Colleen Gray. Her hair's, and she was so. I remember when I went to her house the first time. I don't think I was in the house 5 minutes, and she was putting those in my hand. Like, look at these pictures. Look at this. You think I'm one way, but look at this.
Yeah, those are I because I went I before recording, I told, for anyone watching, I told Eddie that I got the original the original copy as well. So I mean, a lot of the photos are the same, but there are some different ones.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of different ones. Some that I hadn't seen when I did the first book, and it's like, oh, this is perfect.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I needed to have a picture of Marie in her Western garb because
that's right. Yeah.
Because she loved making Westerns more than she liked making the crime pictures and stuff. And so it felt important for me to get a picture of her in her cowgirl outfit, and yeah, she was pretty great.
Yeah. No, I've always loved she Marie also reminds me of Ileana Douglas. I think they even took a picture together.
Oh yes. Yes, Ileana is a buddy of mine, and we talk about that quite a bit.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. No, I had her on her to discuss her new book, and I really love Ileana. I won't keep you too much longer. I just had one last question, which is, as I was saying, there's so many. I may even do it. I may, make a letterbox list of every movie you mention in this, and then people could just look through the list. Just off the top of your head, if you could just pick a few go-tos for that might complement the book while people are reading it, what would you suggest people see?
Oh, well, some of them are pretty obvious. Like with Jane, it's Out of the Past, obviously, because that's, unfortunately, she didn't get to make too many great movies. So Out of the Past is the one that stands up. I'm trying to unearth at Warner Brothers a picture she did. It's not really very good, but I think the hardcore fans would like it, called The Company She Keeps.
Oh.
Where Jane and Elizabeth Scott are in the movie together. With Dennis O'Keefe. I mean, it's not very good, but it deserves to be unearthed and seen again. Obviously, The Killing has both Colleen and Marie Windsor in it, so that's a pretty obvious one. Audrey Totter, I just showed Tension on TCM. Probably her most vivid bad girl role.
Yeah.
But she's in all kinds of great stuff, The Unsuspected and Alias Nick Beale.
Yeah. Setup.
The setup.
Yeah. Classic.
Yeah. And, Anne, it's obviously Detour. If you haven't seen Detour, that's the picture for Anne. Who am I leaving out? This is embarrassing. Evelyn. I mean, The Prowler is Evelyn's great noir picture, wonderful. but she's in quite a few. She's in Hell's Half Acre and 99 River Street with Peggy Castle, so you get a twofer there. And Johnny O'Clock with Dick Powell. Yeah. Evelyn actually had a Johnny O'Clock poster on the wall of her apartment. And I said, why that one of all the movies you made? She said, look at my hair. Look at the way my hair is moving in this poster. She says, I put that up there to remind me I once had great hair.
I also liked her a lot in The Killer That Stalked New York.
Yeah, yeah.
That could also go under the hospital noir
exactly
genre.
Plague noir. Yeah. That's a pretty underrated film. I like that movie.
Yeah, I thought it was quite good. Yeah, she's really wonderful in it. For people who want to go to any of the upcoming noir festivals, when is the next one happening?
There's a Noir City happening in Boston in May that I will not be attending, but my colleague Foster Hirsch
Oh,
will be hosting that, and then I'll be in Portland in July, and that festival will be based around the book, obviously. And then there's Chicago in early September at the Music Box. There's a festival in September in Detroit at the Redford Theater. There is one in Washington, well, in Silver Spring, Maryland. We call it Noir City, DC, but it's at the AFI Theater in Silver Spring, Maryland. And then Noir City, Philadelphia. We also cheat because it's actually in Phoenixville at the Colonial Theater in Phoenixville, and that is in November. And then, there's a lot of travel these days, And then there's the TCM Festival that's coming up, and then there's the TCM Cruise, and then I'm trying to make it to some film festivals overseas this year as well. So, and then somewhere in there I got to write another book. So there's a lot of stuff going on, right?
Busy man. I've wanted to go to the TCM festival for a long time. So one day I'll be when Trump stops saying 51st state, he's momentarily stopped. I'll make my way. I'm a little hesitant to head to the States these days, but
yeah, understandably so.
Yeah.
I do want to. One last thing I do want to say though that I found kind of interesting is, so the recent festival I did in Hollywood, we had a little subset. We did all kinds of films featuring these actresses that we're talking about, but then we did a little subset of more modern noir films that were female centric, right? So we showed The Last Seduction and the Grifters and Nicole Kidman's Destroyer, which is a film I love that doesn't get.
I still have to see that.
You do. That is I'm going to call it a masterpiece.
Oh, okay.
And Bound, right, with Jennifer Tilly and Gina Gershon. And it was interesting to show those movies. And Annette Bening came out and appeared with the Grifters, and Jennifer Tilly came out with Bound. And it was just really interesting to interview them on the same stage where I had first met all of these women that I profiled many, many years earlier, and to just see the difference in the life of a contemporary actress as opposed to a woman working back in the 40s and 50s, because the women today are allowed to age. They have more control over their own careers, and because Annette Bening has had a fabulous career.
Yeah.
Right. And has been nominated for more Academy Awards than Barbara Stanwyck. Okay. So she is a great actress.
She is.
And she's totally in charge of her career, and she keeps working, and she does the pictures she wants to do. She finds age appropriate material. She's 60 something now, she's basically my age. I'm 66. She's my age. As is Jennifer. I mean, Jennifer Tilly is my age, and she's, still doing, Housewives of Beverly Hills, and, and she's got a tremendous career. She's famous for like multiple things, for being the bride of Chucky, and for,
right.
She has her Bound following, and she has her Housewives following, and she's a world-class poker player.
Yes.
And to me, it's just fascinating how much progress has been made in that sense for actresses to have much more control over their careers than they used to. I mean, it's not easy down at the bottom. It's tougher than ever if you're trying to get work, right. despite TikTok and all that stuff, it's like that energy is going in a different direction, but it's anyway, it's just it just struck me as like, well, this is pretty cool, because I like to think that the women I profiled in this book kind of paved the way for people like Annette Bening and Jennifer Tilly to, and Nicole Kidman for that matter,
Right.
to have to have more control, I guess is what I'm saying, over their lives and careers.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's interesting that they're also playing like the main love interest as well. I noticed last year how many movies where older women dating younger men, which you would have never saw.
Right.
I mean, rare. And what was it? Joan Crawford did one. Um, the name is escaping me.
Yes, yes,
Uh,
yes.
but well, as a film I love, for some reason I'm blanking on the name. Uh,
Basically, every movie in the 50s, Joan was with a younger guy.
That's true. Yeah, she was the only one. But I've noticed that I was like, wow, there's so many of these movies where it's like these much older women, and where you would have never even Annette Bening playing Gloria Graham. That was all of the story of
Right,
her with a
right.
younger man, right?
Which she did brilliantly, I will add.
Yeah, I agree. I really like that movie.
I thought that movie was fantastic, and it really was sad that it was so neglected.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think I'm going to make an effort now that I have a somewhat higher profile because of TCM. I'm really going to make an effort to start resurrecting newer films that deserve attention, not just the older ones from the 40s and 50s, but Film Stars Don't Die in Liverpool that Annette did was just a fantastic movie. She's really brilliant in it. Yeah. And the direction is incredible. Paul McGuigan, his direction is phenomenal in that movie. And then Destroyer with Nicole Kidman, which I just showed at the it's like, how did this movie slip through the cracks? It's just, and I know how it happened. It was because the media and the business relies too much on award season, and they debuted that movie at Telluride, which is like a bellwether for award season. Like the buzz is going to come out, and it was released at Christmas. It's the worst Christmas movie possible, and because she wasn't nominated for an Oscar for that, the studio just kind of dropped it. And it was like, well, we don't know how to sell this. If we're not selling it, like, you got to see Nicole Kidman give the greatest performance of her career. But it was Nicole Kidman who didn't look at all like Nicole Kidman.
Totally different.
She was unrecognizable. Right. And nobody wanted that. Nobody wanted it. So they just ignored the film, which is incredible. It's one of the best neo-noir films ever.
Wow.
So anyway.
All right. I'm going to watch that
one. Go buy my book and watch Destroyer.
That's the plug for today. I will also leave the links. I'll leave the links in the description box to point people to Eddie's website, the Film Noir Foundation website, and which has all the information about the upcoming festivals. So Eddie, this was such a treat. Thanks again so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely a pleasure, Robert. I really appreciate the work you do, and keep at it. Keep at it. You're good.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And thank you all so much for watching. I want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you're interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, head over to the link, patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies for full details. You can also leave a donation, or what I call a tip, by clicking the thanks link, which you will find directly below the video frame. Just click on that and you can leave a donation if you choose to. Of course, I would greatly appreciate that. And lastly, if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing. It is absolutely free to do so. By pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the movie logo, you will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left. In just a second, just click on that. And then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new videos. I would also really appreciate if you leave a comment, share the video, like the video. All of these things create traction onto my YouTube channel and really help share the video far and wide, and the channel in general. So thank you so much for doing that, and I will see you all in the next one.